Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life.
This podcast is brought to you by Farmhand. Farmhand is the all-in-one software platform and virtual assistant built by and for independent farmers. Through a simple text or email to Farmhand, you can instantly offload admin tasks, automate your CSA, update your website, and sell more to your customers. With zero startup costs or long-term commitments, farmers are reporting an average of 6+ hours in time savings and 20% in sales growth each week. Learn more and take the quiz to see how much you can save by partnering with Farmhand. Visit farmhand.partners/podcast. That's farmhand.partners/podcast to learn more.
Hey, Thriving Farmers, Michael Kilpatrick here with yet another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. And today my guest is Jim Sander of Wildflower Lane Farm in North Carolina. After a successful career selling to local markets and CSAs, Jim shifted his farm's focus to growing produce exclusively for local food relief groups using regenerative techniques, increasing both food production and personal fulfillment. Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So talk to us a little bit about what was your start in farming?
Well, I didn't grow up on a farm, grew up in the suburbs.
Okay.
And I always knew at some point I wanted to be a small farmer, kind of like the guys you see at the farmer's market. And I live out in the country, but I was not farming until I hit about age 60. And that was 13 years ago. And I realized if I didn't get this going at age 60, it probably wasn't going to get going.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of gave me the kick in the butt to get going.
Okay, so you got started, and what were some of like the early questions you had, or the early like things you had to figure out?
Well, I was literally starting from scratch. I live on 24 acres, but I took 1 acre that was wooded and cleared it, and found an old friend who was knew a lot about organic farming. He was actually working as a farm consultant, and hired him. And I went through kind of like an incubator farm course called the Breeze Farm, where you go and lease land and they give you classes in farming, and you kind of see if you're cut out for this or not.
Gotcha.
So I did that for a year. Pretty much everybody dropped out by the end of the year, but I kept going. It's a good program because it enables you to see if you want to do this before you buy the farm. And it helps a lot of people sort that out. So I did that for about a year, and then I got to working on my farm. I cleared the land, put in the beds, had a lot of infrastructure needs like a well and a driveway, put up some hoop houses, fencing, all that kind of stuff. So that was the beginning, yeah. And then had to figure out what to grow and who was going to buy it from me.
Yeah. So then, so you're growing the product. What would you say were the challenges in your first years with growing? Was there any specific crops that you struggled with?
Well, I tried a little bit of everything, and I found out the hard way which things don't work. I don't think it's worth doing things like corn or potatoes or sweet potatoes in North Carolina. You can get them so cheaply. Melons, the same thing. So I asked a lot of people, a lot of questions, and the best advice I got was grow about 5 or 6 things per season. Focus on 5 or 6 easy things in the spring, then switch to summer crops, then go back to fall crops, which are probably pretty similar to the spring crops, cool weather stuff. And that was pretty good advice. So I probably went with some of your standard greens, chard, kale, collards,
Hmm.
bok choy, and a bunch of lettuces. Um, and started to get pretty good with that. And then in the summer, I switched to peppers and eggplants and cherry tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, more or less your standard fare, nothing too fancy to begin with.
Hmm. Okay. And then you're now, when you started your farm, what were your markets? Who were you selling to?
Well, that was the big challenge. I couldn't get in the farmers markets. Uh, I tried three different ones for 3 years and never got in. So I actually went to a distributor called ECO, which stands for Eastern Carolina Organics, and they acted as a distributor. So they would find you the markets, and you would drop the produce off at their place, their warehouse, and they would deliver it. But they took a substantial cut for doing that.
Y-
That
Yeah,
was the easiest way, but it didn't have the return nearly that you'd have selling retail at a farmer's market.
correct. Gotcha. So it was more of a part, like a crop share, or, well, it was just like a wholesale arrangement.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I was selling wholesale, which was about 60% of retail at that time. Um, that would be after they took their cut. So they would find me places. So that allowed me to get into, say, Whole Foods, all over the state, which I never could have done myself. Um,
Yeah.
and like I know at Whole Foods, I think they say you have to be a proven farmer for at least 3 years before they'll talk to you, which is understandable. But this allowed me to get right in. So I asked them, what are your niche crops that maybe there's some holes in the schedule, things that people aren't doing.
Yeah.
So that was pretty good. They told me there was different types of beets and different types of cherry tomatoes that people weren't covering. So it enabled me to sell stuff right away, um, at a lower price, but it got me in the ball game right away.
Yeah. And then during this time, like, how big of a scale were you operating at?
Um, Probably about 3/4 of an acre.
Hmm.
And it's funny you mentioned that because I had a farm advisor, a farm consultant, and this is probably 12 or 13 years ago. And he said, I said, what could I grow on an acre? How much? If I got, pretty good at this. And he said, probably 20 to $30,000 worth of produce,
Mm.
retail price. And he said something about California was only averaging like 14,000 per acre or something. It was very low. So that's what I went by about maybe 12 years ago, was you could grow 20 to $30,000
Mm.
worth on an acre and maybe make half of that if you were good. And that's gone up, as you know, substantially since then.
Absolutely. Yeah. So then kind of like your farm morphed. So kind of talk a little bit about kind of like how your farm developed into what it is today.
Well, I did that for 7 years. And a few years after he told me the 20 to $30,000 mark, he said, I think I'm going to have to double that estimate because I'm hearing about a lot of people who are doing maybe 40, 50, 60,000 per acre. So that was encouraging. And I kept doing the same model I had for about the first 7 years, which was selling through the distributor, and they were taking a cut, and it was mostly wholesale prices. I developed a few other restaurants that would give me a better price than that. But that was about it. And then after 7 years, it wasn't really getting better. Um, the prices I was getting for the produce seemed to be the same. but my
Okay.
expenses were going up. And I really loved doing this, but I was running around a lot to make a little bit of money.
Hmm.
And I think it was after the 7th year, this friend of mine just said to me, you really ought to stay with this because you love doing it and you're starting to get pretty good at it. But there's something about this economic model that doesn't make sense. Like
Mm.
you're running around too much and you're not getting reimbursed more. Um, so one day I was walking around town. I live outside of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I saw this food relief group had a sign out in front of their building. It said feeding local kids. So I just walked in on the spur of the moment and said, what do you do? Maybe we can work together. Maybe I can grow you some food. And that's where it started. So that's been going on the last 6 years.
Okay. So then talk us a little bit how that's set up. Is it set up as an actual nonprofit or?
Yeah, they're a nonprofit.
Okay.
They get a lot of food from a lot of sources. There's quite a few food relief groups out there now.
Hmm.
Um, they do, I think what they send out is about half cans and boxes, and then about half perishables, about half produce. And so I said to him, at that point, I was kind of retired from another career I had, and I was just interested in doing this, maybe just to have a lot of fun with it. And I said, if you'll pay for all my expenses, I'll give you about 20 hours a week free, and you'll have to give me some volunteers, and we'll just see what we can produce, and we'll give you all the food. So in other
Mm.
words, I don't want to lose money, but I don't have to make any money.
Mm. Okay.
So
And-
I'll spend money on expenses and then they reimburse me.
Okay. And so then let's talk a little bit about the labor. How does the labor work? Do you have volunteers come in or?
Yeah, right now we have about an acre fenced off, but we're only growing on, say, 3/4 of an acre. And we need about 60 hours a week to maintain that. So I put in about 20 hours. I work like 4 hours a day for 5 days a week. And then they have a paid employee they pay to come out and help me for another 20. And then we get volunteers for another 20. So that gets us up to about 60, maybe 70 hours a week that we
Mhm.
need.
Okay.
Uh,
And then have you changed your crop mix with this new format?
um, I've kind of hit on a good format because I'm trying to stay simple.
Yeah.
Um, I have to realize that, a third or sometimes even a half of my labor is not skilled farm labor.
Hmm.
You can't give them something that needs a lot of prior experience. Um, and I try to we get two types of volunteers. One is someone who comes once a week for 2 or 3 hours, and the other one is we get groups. We get a lot of church groups and university groups
Okay.
who come once for like maybe half a day, and they send me like 10 people.
Okay. So there's like a lot of people, but they're very unskilled. So they're good for like weeding carrots or something like that.
Yeah, I do a lot of planting seedlings with them. Uh,
Okay. Yes. Because
uh,
even weeding carrots, I was just thinking,
yeah,
you have to know what a carrot looks like in order to be able to weed it.
right. Yeah, so we stay very simple. Like my beds will be, I use the silage tarps on them.
Hmm.
They come out looking beautiful, and I'll prep them, and then lay down the drip lines, and we'll set them out with thousands of lettuce, chard, kale seedlings.
Hmm.
They just plant every foot on the drip, and it's pretty simple, and they're pretty good at it.
Yeah.
So I try to stay simple. And the big thing I do is I'm prepared for when they come. So when
Yes.
they come, I just line them right out, and they're very, they're used very efficiently.
Okay. And then so for your lettuce and stuff, is that something you can do most of the summer down there, or you only do that spring and fall?
That's spring and fall. I'm planting some now. It's a heat resistant lettuce from Johnny's.
Okay.
But I'll do an early one, a green and a red, and now I'm doing a green and a red that's going to take me into June. And that's getting a little tricky, mid to late June. That's about as late as you want to be here, I think.
Gotcha.
Um, and so we're doing some heat resistance. I think it's Cherokee and Muir from Johnny's.
Yep.
And what we do now in the spring is chard, kale, collards, and a couple of types of lettuce. So we got like 5 things. And when I get a group, we'll plant, thousands of seedlings.
Hmm.
Now we're starting to harvest. So harvesting, head lettuce is pretty easy.
Yeah.
Kale, chard, it's all stuff that, you teach them in 5 or 10 minutes and nobody can really screw it up too much.
Correct.
Uh,
Now, with your crops, do you wash those before they go to the nonprofit, or is that something that you can just put right in cases and away it goes?
yeah, we put the lettuce in bags, individual bags that they supply us with, and then we'll send them big bags of chard and kale and collards, and they'll clean them up and put a rubber band around them and put them in the food boxes. They do that there because we try to handle it very little here
Hmm.
and very quickly. Like we harvest, we'll work about 8 to 11 every morning harvesting, and then around 11:30 a truck comes and picks up the produce, and it's in their facility by noon, and then they're sending it out on the road to their recipients by 12:30 or 1.
Gotcha.
So it's
Okay.
pretty unheard of. Like people are getting our produce at 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and it was probably picked at 9 or 10 in the morning.
Yeah. Now, do you maintain a walk-in cooler, or because it's so fast, you don't feel you need to?
We have a walk-in cooler with the CoolBot system,
Yeah.
and that's good enough for the greens. We'll usually cool the lettuce for 24 hours before we send it out, just to kind of build some coolness into it. But the rest of the greens, like today, we were going right up till 11:30, almost 12, picking, and threw it right in the van, and it was in town in 20 minutes. So no need to cool
Gotcha.
that stuff.
Yeah. How do you advertise for your volunteers?
They come almost all through the food group. The food group uses a lot. They have a lot of volunteers. They say every 2 weeks they have about 150 volunteers come through their facility for shifts.
Okay.
They are very well known, very well respected. Uh, I couldn't bring volunteers in because very few people knew me.
Yeah.
Uh, so through them, they're called Table. They advertise on their website, we need farm help. And people like to come out. I also get people doing community service.
Hmm.
And then there's, oh, college kids who can come out and get some sort of uh, accreditation or something. Like they have to do some number of hours volunteer for a course or something. Uh, we get people who are in like the sociology of food course. They come out a lot, and
Hmm.
uh, people want to go into social work. We get a lot of doctoral students coming out, masters of public health people. So people are interested in health and food, like to come out, and the average person comes out for 2 or 3 hours once a week.
Yeah. So then with the farm, I'm just trying to think of like setting up for volunteers and something like that. Someone decided to go down this route. Do you have like an on-farm bathroom or facilities for them to wash their hands? How does that all work?
Yeah, we have a bathroom here. We have an outdoor kitchen. They can wash up. We have a refrigerator with drinks and snacks in it.
Okay.
And before they can come out, they have to go through an online sign up with table, which means that they have to sign a waiver
Uh-huh.
in
Okay.
case they,
Yeah.
you know, got stung by an ant or something or twisted their ankle. So I'm not,
Yes.
I have no liability there.
Yes. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. So you got the liability part, you got the bathroom. Parking. Do you have like a little parking lot they park in?
Yeah, there's big long driveway. They park along the side of it.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. So you've got the whole thing laid out. Ari, let's talk the importance of communication. Too often farmers let this one slide.
That's absolutely true. And communications are key for selling your products, retaining your customers, and overall, I see three common opportunities for farmers. The first is to use SMS or text messages. 90% of SMSs are read right away, and it's a much more effective channel to reach customers quickly versus email or phone calls. So they can be perfect for order updates, order reminders to make sure people pick up at the right time. It can also be very effective for upsells or flash sales where you've got a very focused promotion and you want to give it an offer and it's a limited time or it's an act now opportunity. The second is let's talk about how your product is unique. Let's break it away from commodities. What is unique about what you are growing, what you are selling, and what story and education can you provide to customers, whether that's through how to eat it with recipes, how to preserve it, or even education around your farming practices that make this a particularly better product than what you could maybe find at your local grocery store. And then the third is consistency. So it's very often that unexpected things happen at the farm. Weather is unpredictable every single year and things break. But your ability to keep consistent communications and have a system in place where customers can expect regular communications from you, updates from you, increases the level of confidence in you as a buyer and also keeps them as customers longer as you're able to retain them, engage them, and ultimately build a stronger connection with them.
Absolutely. Now, by partnering with Farmhand, farmers can save upwards of 6 to 10 hours a week, provide 5-star support, and grow sales 20% plus with improved marketing and time freed up to focus on strategic initiatives. Where can they find out more information about the software?
You can visit farmhand.partners/podcast.
And then, like your crop planning for the season, is that something that's pretty easy? Because it sounds like you're doing a pretty limited variety of crops then.
Yeah, we decided, I like the 5 or 6 per season rule. And
Yeah.
I'd rather give them 5 or 6 crops, but a lot of them than 20 different crops and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, which might be more of your farmer's market strategy, where people know you got a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So we stick to 5 or 6. Like right now, we're giving out about 1,000 heads of lettuce a week, and hundreds of pounds of greens. And that we kind of keep it simple. We know that people can plant those and harvest those and deliver them. And they're pretty easy to do from
Yeah.
seedling to harvest. It's pretty easy to do. So we keep it simple and try to do quantity of a few things. And that, also
Yeah.
then I don't have to figure out bugs and disease and soil amendments for 25 different crops. It's really pretty simple. We're doing 5 or 6 in the spring, and that's the same 5 or 6 in the fall. Then a
Yeah.
different 5 or 6 in the summer. So that's made it easy for us, and they like that too. We give them stuff that everybody likes.
Talk about your soil fertility program. Kind of like, how does that work?
Well, I use Logan Labs in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of them?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. We used to use them for a
Okay.
while, a long while, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was using the free county tests, but I got suspicious because every time the results came back, it looked like I was just didn't need anything. Everything was just great. And I decided to, double check that against Logan, and they came back with some very specific amendments that I needed. And that guy actually told me, he says, "I bet your tomatoes aren't very sweet, are they?" And I said, "You're right." And he said, "Yeah, I could tell because of, I think it was calcium level or something."
Well, yeah, phosphorus too is for all about
Yeah.
your sweetness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So he could
yeah.
tell that right away. That impressed me. So what I do is I get their testing, and then I have a phone conversation with them, and I patch in the soil person from my local farm store. And she's a
Okay.
bit of an expert, so they both know a lot more than I do. And I found that that's an easy way to really get good advice is you put two experts together and you learn while you're kind of in the middle of the conversation. So he's telling us what we're deficient in, and she's saying, "Well, I've got bags of this or bags of that," and he says that'd be perfect. And um, so I'm learning a lot, but I'm using the experts on both ends, really.
And then is your soil naturally low in pH, or do you have to apply any lime?
No, I'm a little high.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, a little bit high, but it's not bad. It's actually pretty good soil, and I've been working at, you uh, fixed raised beds for 13 years now. And we'll test in the fall. And then when we go to plant cover crops in the fall, we'll put our amendments in then too.
Yeah.
Might want a few months for them to kind of incorporate into the soil. And then we try to do extensive cover cropping in the fall.
Yeah.
And learning more about that. And then, in the spring we'll come in, kind of the never sink model. I'm sure you know lots of people are doing that.
Okay.
Where we'll then come in with silage tarps in the spring. Does a really good job at killing all the weeds, and then we'll put a few amendments in. And I do everything. All my soil prep is with a broad fork and the
Okay.
filter from Johnny's.
Okay. And
I got their newest one,
and
which
how have you liked that?
I love it. It's much different than the old one.
Okay.
Um, it's a bigger, heavier machine, and it's much more powerful. Um, so I don't use anything else. It's just all broad forking in the spring and then tilting.
Okay. Now the tilt that they've got, is it more powerful because they have a gear reduction that allows the drill to spin faster, or?
Well, the drill is placed in a different place.
Okay.
It's uh it's hitting the gears at a different angle.
Gotcha.
And it's a sturdier machine.
Yeah.
It's just built sturdier. It also, you don't have to pull on a cord now. You have that like bicycle brake uh
Yeah.
fixture, which Neversink has one of those too. But that's a big improvement over pulling on that cord. And the whole machine is it's heavier to haul around, but it's a much better machine. So I'm very happy with it, and it seems to do everything I need it to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. What would you say would be like your best advice to someone who's thinking of starting a farm like yours?
By mine, you mean this model I have or this size?
Yes, like
Oh,
the nonprofit model. Maybe someone who is looking to just kind of like share their time and
right.
expertise and just produce food for the
Yeah.
community.
Well, that's my next step is to promote this model around the county here.
Mm,
And there's also a way that the farmer can get paid. Um, because if you look at the numbers, we produce food so cheaply. Um, like we'll probably, now this would be a retail figure. provide them with about $150,000 worth this year.
Mm.
And we're doing that on a budget of probably 25 to 30,000.
Okay.
So the food group gets a great deal. But we eliminate all labor. There's no labor. A lot of my friends are probably using 30, 40% of their budget for labor. My
Yeah.
labor is free or paid for. Then there's no advertising, there's no distributor, there's no farm profit, there's no store profit. Just imagine whatever you need for materials, that's your budget. Seeds, seedlings, compost, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
the numbers are so good that if you paid me, I don't know, $10 or $15,000, $20,000, you would still be paying very little. You might be paying 40 or 50,000 for like 140 or $150,000 worth of produce.
Yeah.
And they offer to pay me, and I say, no, it's okay. I'm trying to give back at this stage of the game, and I'm doing okay. So I prefer not getting paid, but I think it would be a perfect job for a retiring farmer
Mm.
who has, say, a field. You have the infrastructure, you just don't want to do it anymore. But it's hard getting that out of your system. I don't think you can do it for 30 or 40 years and then just give it up so easily. So if you were, say, a retired farmer, you could get paid for your supervisory efforts, and you got no worries about marketing it or how much you're growing or how much you're selling or who's taking what or taking it to market and bringing it back home, or because the numbers are so good, whatever you give the food group, they're going to be very happy with, and it's going to be the cheapest produce they get, because
Yeah.
way below wholesale prices.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I
Um,
think it's a good model or the other thing is if you're an existing farmer and you could put in, say, 10 hours a week on this, and you have, say, a half acre that's right next to your acreage, you could supervise people a little bit and get a helper and get paid. And there's 3 or 4 different ways you could pay the farmer too. You could cut them a check. That's the easiest. You could also give them a tax credit if you're a 501c3, food group,
mhm.
because they're giving you something of value. So you can give them a tax credit. And the other thing is you could do a bartering system where the guy might say, you don't have to pay me, but if you could give me some volunteers a couple of times a year, like if I'm picking a certain crop or I want to plant a lot of seedlings, just give me some volunteer labor once in a while. That'll be like a swap for my efforts.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different ways you could take care of the farmer. And I know around here, a lot of small farmers, kind of your farmer's market type guy who has an acre or two, they're really on edge a lot. If you have a bad year, you may lose money. And a guaranteed income like this could help stabilize things where,
Mhm.
no matter what happens, you've got $10,000 coming in from, being a supervisor for this project.
Yeah. Well, yeah, especially if they're retired, they don't really have a lot going on. They just want to stay busy. That they could focus on that. That might be a great. As you said, you work about 4 hours a day.
Yeah, I work about 8 to 12, 4 or 5 days a week. And that's in the summer because it's hot. But yeah, it would be a part-time job and you'd get a part-time income and you have no stress of worrying about, well, I grew this beautiful produce, am I going to sell it at the farmer's market this week? Or will the distributor take everything I have? So you don't worry about storage or transporting it or marketing it. You just help people grow it and then they just take it, a few days a week, they just take it back to the food group. So that's something I'd like to promote because I think it's kind of a win-win for the small farmer, and it's a win for the food group. So I think it, serves a couple of needs at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say to someone who's thinking about just getting started for farming in general? Like, what kind of advice would you give them?
Couple of things. Well, I think, I think being an apprentice can be really helpful.
Okay.
Working on a farm for a summer who is doing something similar to what you'd want to do,
Okay.
because you're getting paid and you're learning a lot. And I think if you have a good relationship with the farmer, you could probably call them at any time in the future and ask them some questions. I think that's a good one. And I would ask a lot of questions. I'd go on some farm tours. Like we have farm tours in this community where you can go to, there's probably 30 or 40 farms on the tour. I did that. I asked a lot of questions. I found a guy who was a farm consultant, and he was a little tough on me because he said, this is not easy.
Yeah.
Most people drop out. Also, the incubator farm I was on, if you can, was a great resource because they would give us classes every week on different aspects of farming, taught by local farmers. And then they would lease us land very cheaply. I leased like a half acre of land for a couple $100 for a year. And
Yeah.
you work with other beginning farmers. The county extension agents are there if you need them. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of approach it. And I'd say a farm like that, an apprenticeship, farm tours, and asking a lot of questions, reading a lot of books. The books are good, and the videos are good, but when you really get down to doing it, that's when you really learn, what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise. It's very interesting to hear about your model and how you make it work. And, thank you for the work you're doing to feed your community.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. I think it's a great podcast you have here.
Oh, thank you. One final question.
Are you going to Joel Saladin's?
Yes, I will be down at Joel's here in for the Rogue Food Conference in I think that's next weekend.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go on Saturday.
Okay.
I may
All right.
be there
Well,
Saturday.
I will look forward to meeting you.
Okay. And you had one more question, you said?
Yes. What is your favorite tool on the farm?
Favorite tool?
Yes.
It's got to be the tilther, I think.
Okay.
I love,
All right.
I love the fact that I don't have to deal with oil and gas anymore.
Yeah.
And my whole power source is a drill, and I've got 3 drills here. Everybody has a drill at their house. I could borrow my neighbor's drill if I had to. And the fact that I could till a whole acre of land with a drill just kind of still amazes me. So I love the tilter, and if you're going to get one, I'd get the newest one from Johnny's.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, yeah. Thank you, Jim.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. I'll probably see you Saturday.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
So there you have it. Another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.